Morning. Well, are these okay for breakfast, by the way?
Anytime, any place.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. So wanted to just maybe start off with quick intros. I know titles sometimes could be a mouthful, but would love to just maybe, if you guys can take a minute or two and just kind of share really about kind of, day-to-day responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Vinson. I'm leading all of our global modern marketing transformation within Kellogg. So really that means everything from consumer data strategy to media operations, omni-commerce, and working with this guy right here on all of our advanced analytics so that we can drive better outcomes for our business.
You should get danger money, for sure. So my job is to bring sexy back to data. When we try and position data in the company around analytics, you get this kind of feeling. So, it's very important to make sure that, what we do is clearly articulated in business terms. And so my role is just that, is to find a problem, find a solution using technology and data, and then make sure it resonates with the audience. And that's really what I do on a daily basis. Just getting a bit of feedback here.
Well, we're going to bring energy today, this morning, okay? And to go full circle, so I started off my career, I actually went to school in Western in Kalamazoo. So 30 years ago, my first project in marketing, and food marketing specifically, was for Kellogg's. And it was Kellogg's Temptation cereal, which is no longer around. But it's great. So, I'm super excited to just spend time with you on so many superhero iconic brands as well. So we'll start off with a little icebreaker. Favorite Kellogg brand?
It's really hard, but Pringles for me, this is the dangerous stack. And Screaming Dill Pickle is actually my favorite flavor. They're sometimes hard to find because we do a lot of limited edition with specific retailers. But that one is the one that gets me.
I'm like a billboard.
I know you are a billboard today.
So I'm conflicted, Jeff. So I've got my Pringles T-shirt, and I think of Pringles like puppies. I've never met a flavor I didn't like. So that's an analogy I've had in my mind now. And I've also got my Tony the Tiger shoes on, as you can see. Yeah. So that's my childhood. Frosted Flakes. No, they're not custom. It's a collaboration between us and Puma around the Year of the Tiger, which was obviously just passed. So this was a really
on
good
sale
collab.
now.
Actually, not much left, to be fair. Yeah. So yeah, in all honesty, Cheez-Its is my favorite, especially Cheez-Its with wine, because it's a perfect partnership. Cheese and wine, how wrong can you go?
Merlot, Cabernet, or?
Oh, it's a good point.
Different flavors go with different varietals of wine.
Oh. Exactly. White cheddar Cheez-Its, nice glass of Chardonnay, perhaps.
Hey. So the shoes will be on StockX later on today. Just another Detroit plug. Well, why don't we really question for both of you, kind of beginning with the end in mind. Obviously, CES is well beyond just electronics. What would you like to impress really on this group today, and what would you like to leave them with?
Yeah, I think for me, it's that we are on this amazing journey right now of accelerating how data and advanced analytics and the partnerships that we now have available, especially in the CPG side with our retailers, to be able to better unlock more personalized and inclusive experiences that can drive deeper engagement with our consumers and shoppers, but also can improve our marketing effectiveness and efficiency. So it's really exciting to be here to learn more about the different technology partners and how we're bringing more of this advanced analytics and automation to drive more predictive and prescriptive outcomes.
Mm. I want to leave you with a thought that's a little bit provocative. It's focused on failure. That sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? We're biologically conditioned to strive for success. Now, I've heard multiple people talk about failing fast, and that's the right thing to do, but it's difficult to do. I also heard a few people talk about, building on lessons learned from failure. And I think that's the wrong position to adopt. Because if you've got lessons to learn from failure, you took too long to recognize failure in the first place. So if you bring failure to the forefront of your thinking and look for it with purpose and intentionality, then you will find that failure quicker, fail quicker, and you won't have any lessons to learn. You'll be able to move on. And so that's going to be a theme of, I think, some of the conversations today. And it's a mind shift, because through that lens of failure, you'll look at your problems differently, and that will give you a different perspective.
And I would imagine that's all the way through the organization, right? As far as new flavors, products, lines of business, as well, not just marketing and media. Nicole, so what advice can you give different marketers or organizations that are on different stages throughout the marketing technology or journey, or even digital transformation journey? I know people are at different stages. I know there's different ages of companies or maturity of companies here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building on what Rob just said is that, we have to build a culture internally around curiosity and innovation, and going back to this whole fail fast and learn, and pivot and be agile. And so a lot of the things that we're working on internally is changing that culture, and trying to drive more experimentation, but also really trying to ingrain into our business that we are on a constant learning journey. And so we need to be carving out those innovation dollars to constantly be testing and learning, but also not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? So it's like, if it didn't work the first time, that's okay, but it doesn't mean that you have to completely abandon ship. It's like, what can you take from that, learn, and then reapply to the next one? I think that we historically, especially CPG, who is, a laggard in transformation, we tend to think in campaigns and in this 3-month window, but really the world is always on. And so you have to start thinking about being iterative in everything that you're doing, and then really documenting and sharing that learning faster and creating more feedback loops, so that you're really starting to build this culture of like, we're on this together, and everyone needs to sort of hold hands, but don't be afraid of testing and learning and failing. And I think for a company as old as we are, we're like 116 or 17 years, I think, this year. That's
you guys look great for your age, by the way.
Right. Yeah. But I think it's, you really have to change the way that people think, and in driving that ability to fail, and building that into your day-to-day, and then thinking about also how you measure your different test and learn experiments, because they might not always pay out as well as an existing tried and true capability or tactic or execution, things like that. So I think for me, that's the biggest area that I'm trying to drive within our organization today.
And that's really what started the company, right, with cornflakes, right? It was experimentation, and just kind of almost by accident as well. So it's interesting, it's now full circle as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Rob, same thing kind of on the culture side too. How are you, or how is Kellogg's in general creating the culture for innovation? Because it's really on a global stage.
No, for sure. And that fear of failure has got to be removed from your culture to start with. And there's a lot of old management styles that prevent that from happening. And so there's an active process within Kellogg's. We have growth principles, one of which is courage. And courage can mean many things, of course: standing up for your colleagues, challenging the status quo, but also, innovating differently. So we're trying to create purpose around, thinking a different way to solve a problem, and potentially not looking for the money to support it first, but to use the power of the brand, for instance. So we're looking for collaboration, for partners, whether that's a technology partner, whether it's a peer in the industry, or a startup who has a great idea that wants to try and find a platform. Then there's a great brand here to leverage. So we're looking at the way that we approach innovation in a much more holistic way, and it was a different approach, because it's so easy to go ahead and execute something that fails or succeeds without asking for permission, because you weren't asking for a financial response. So leave no financial footprint in a failure. Great, walk away, nobody cares. Then this is the unlock for us. So we've got a number of projects. One is about to launch imminently, called Kellogg Antenna, and it's solving the problem of harvesting shopper and consumer insights far quicker than what we can do today. So we can get 10,000 insights within a couple of hours that can be used to reflect upon and change a trajectory of an idea. So we've worked with two companies, one being very large Salesforce, another company being very small AI company called Native Video. And we've built a platform, a web-based platform, that can allow us to just do that. Create an audience of over 1 million people, talk to them in any language in the world, get the sentiment and the reaction to an idea that we have, or perhaps a marketing campaign, get the reaction, and make an early read on whether it will be successful or not. And what a game changer. So an idea in the morning, answers in the afternoon, move on. So that's where we're focused today.
Insight to action.
So are there certain brands or markets that are, I would say, more courageous than others?
No, I think we're Kellogg is really we cover all the gambits of our brands by category. So there's a more of a grouped approach to this problem solving. So I wouldn't say that the brands that are very successful in our portfolio have obviously got more courage because they've got momentum behind them. So that always helps. But we have to globalize, and so there's an active process around making the path clear to where we take our products next. Most people wouldn't know that Cheez-Its, for instance, is only sold predominantly in the US. It's a $1 billion plus brand for us. It could easily be 5x that as we take it internationally. So bringing the other teams on board to create the formula for success, learning from our mistakes, of course, and allowing them to prosper is a big part of what we're trying to do. And of course, marketing plays a critical role in that aspect.
And Cheez-Its was the first brand that welcomed me off the flight here in Delta to CES, by the way.
Nice. Thank you, Delta.
Thank you, Kellogg's. Rob, question for you. So what's your approach really to just data strategy? It's a big question, but...
It is a big question. We won't be able to do it justice. Most of us in this room have probably had an experience where you've gone for an end-to-end data strategy solution. You built your data lake. You've tried to fill it full of all the data you need to be then consumed by all the applications. It's probably the wrong way around. So we're adopting a value-based data strategy, which starts with a problem statement, as I mentioned, finding a use case that is supported by the business, and then harvesting, acquiring, and managing the data that supports that use case. And then, formalizing it once we see success, not before. So we don't build it and they will come. We look for success by knifing and forking it together, using duct tape and sticky tape and everything else we can find. And then if success is there, then we'll start to operationalize it and engineer it for scale. And then we'll do it over 3 horizons, because this big swing in a hit or a miss is really a crapshoot. So if you look at it at the now horizon, which is what can you do today that you can move the needle with the least amount of effort that people will recognize, and you've got something to build on. Then the next horizon is building on top of that to get to your ideal state. So think of now as MVP, next is ideal state, and then beyond is your vision that sells the story in the first place, because it's about storytelling. So nobody really cares about now. They really want to hear about the future because it's exciting, it's sexy. Have that in your narrative, but don't pin the tail on the donkey to the end destination. It's about iterating, as Nicole said. So that it's a slightly different approach. But I think if anybody is fighting against, we need a full end-to-end data strategy across our corporation. Well, yes, you do, but do it in pieces, iterate towards it, and you're going to get your end-to-end strategy at the end of the day.
We have a saying sort of in our marketing organization around, our innovation or our use cases, which is nail it, share it, and scale it. And I think a lot of the use cases that we're being able to execute in sort of rapid fire cadence right now with Rob and his team and with different groups around the globe is just that. And so it's all about how do we execute those use cases that can unlock immediate value, whether that's ROI, improve consumer experience, right? Or we're solving a problem with our customers or supply chain and getting product into the hands or on the shelf even, right? And so it's like, how do we then kind of package those learnings, build those playbooks, deploy them as fast as we can, while kind of building that infrastructure that we need at a global level at the same time. So it is a journey, and it's not like something that we're like snapping our fingers and we're all able to do all of this tomorrow. But I think the approach that we're taking with use cases that over time build capability that we can really embed into our processes and our ways of working and how our teams operate day to day is really the way that we'll be able to really embed all the level of effort and the investment that we're making behind advanced analytics and data.
There's one more point I also want to stress, and it's something where I need your help and you may need our help. When we go to leadership and we approach it in this three horizon perspective, the now horizon hasn't got a lot of value attached to it. It may be 3 million or 5 million. It doesn't really whet their appetite. They're looking for 50, 100, 500 million. So we need to have some articulation and support from other brands to say there's still the right approach. You will build towards that prize of reoccurring incremental revenue gains or profit. So I'm happy to at any time come and help you get the message across if that's what you're pursuing with your leadership. And also, if you're already ahead of us in this process and doing this today and have shown signs of success, we would love for you to come and and talk about how that success has made a difference to your company too. So please, we're an open book. We're stronger together, and the industry doesn't collaborate nearly enough as it should. So we would love to break that and make it happen.
That's fantastic to hear. And we at AdMedia just came back. We were traveling and speaking at 85 conferences last year, and some of those were specific to CPG. Actually, 2 of them last year were specific to CPG. And to have CPG brands kind of unite, collaborate together, is definitely a missing void, right? And some of that is across other industries too, right? Where it's just too competitive and it's guarded, right? But collectively, if folks can come together without sharing trade secrets and strategies and data, I believe the industry will propel itself forward in a pretty big way. So that's really interesting and really refreshing to hear.
Thank you.
So Nicole, full funnel. Obviously, full funnel. People have spoke about. It's a little bit cliche sometimes, but full funnel. Obviously, I'd love to kind of hear your take on that, U.S. but also globally, and kind of what's changed maybe over the last couple of years looking at that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to everybody, right? COVID really accelerated everything that's happening with consumer behavior, their media consumption habits, e-commerce, all of those sorts of things, and so. As we think about full funnel marketing and our ability to create inclusive, personalized experiences for our consumers and shoppers that create a seat at the table for everybody, we really have to be connecting the above the line and the below the line. And so there is so much focus happening within our organization today around breaking down functional silos and really kind of reimagining the way in which we build our strategies all the way from what are our growth targets going to be to how do we plan trade dollars to what's happening in the store. But then really consumers don't see above the line and below the line, right? But what we found is that we have budget pools sitting all over the company. and in order to really deliver a connected consumer experience, you really have to kind of bring all that budget together and you really have to understand what are the jobs to be done, right? And at the top of the funnel all the way through to the bottom. And then how are we working together cross-functionally to deliver those business outcomes? And so there's been a tremendous amount of work with our agency partners and our internal teams to really kind of rethink the way in which we're briefing, the way that we're building our strategies. Are we recruiting, reclaiming, retaining? Because that makes a really big difference around even your trade investments and your price promotion at outlet execution, right? And so it's like we have to move to more of an audience first strategy in the way that we're thinking about and really understanding really where are these people. We can't continue to just say, oh, we're going to be in Facebook and then we're going to be in Meta and then we're going to be on Netflix over here or whatever it is. But we really have to start with the consumer and that deep understanding and then building our programming around that so that the messages are contextual and relevant and somewhat personalized at scale, right? And so it's been a really exciting time because we're bringing a lot of new teams together. We're bringing many new data sources together, and we're really reimagining the way in which we kind of even get to that brief. And what are the measurement and the KPI components at each stage of that funnel? Because the jobs to be done are different, and the measurement shouldn't be the same, right? And so it's been a really exciting time, and I'm really passionate about this, but I think it's really going to make a huge difference in the way that we show up to our consumers and shoppers, and also being more effective in how we invest our media dollars as well.
So specifically inside of that, there's been a lot of changes in the last even 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. On social, right? Mm-hmm. Meta, Twitter, obviously a lot of movement happening. Just how has that maybe disrupted or really changed? Like, how are you thinking about planning social inside of the full funnel?
Yeah, I mean, social is always going to play a big role, right? Like we have to be where our consumers and shoppers are. I mean, the eyeballs are there, right? I think where there's a huge amount of opportunity is understanding how we can create better fit for platform content. Because what a TikTok user is looking for in that environment might be different than what a Facebook or an Instagram user is looking for, right? So I think for us, it's about how do we start to build better content that better resonates with the platform that we're appearing within, because it's not a one size fits all, right, across these channels. And also thinking about video a little bit differently in that sense as well, because we have so many screens today that we can consume video content, but it's like, what is the right form of that video, the duration of that video, the message, the call to action, and then you layer on top of that the shoppability now that we have available to us to like really reduce that funnel that the consumer goes through. So it's a really exciting time, but I think you also have to really be really thinking through as well around like your ESG and your diversity and inclusion, and brand safety is also another big challenge. And so I think for us, we're constantly looking at our brand safety guidelines, our values and mission and purpose as a brand and a company, and then making sure that our partners kind of align to a lot of those areas as well. But certainly it's every audience might be different, so it might not always be one social platform versus the other, or it might be a combination of those depending on who we're trying to go after.
And how about AI? So a question for both of you, really. AI is just so, it's been around the industry for quite a while, obviously. But how do you see really AI at Kellogg specifically just impacting decisions and impacting how you're reaching customers today?
Yeah, it's already becoming an overused term. There's so many different facets to AI. So we've got to be careful, how we put it into position within our strategy. That said, for me, I think two things. One, it's going to help us get a lot closer to the shopper and the consumer, which is going to be great because we can do it at scale. With our teams, we can't do that. Yeah, it'll also become more granular. So if we're going to have an audience-first approach to our marketing, then we talk about a lot of the segmentations. The 18 to 25-year-old group doesn't really show up in panels. It's very hard to acquire that insight. So if you're really focused on that segment, yet all your insight is not covering that segment, then there's a big gap in your strategy. For the second one for me is automation. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about this a little bit towards the end as a takeaway, but you probably don't have a data issue, you have a decision-making issue. So if you can automate the conclusions that data is driving, that's going to be a big shift, because you take out all the emotion in the decision-making that ends up as part of your execution strategy. So these are the two things I think technology will play a massive role in.
Any other thoughts on that, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I think like AI on even just the content production side of things is going to continue to be a really big enabler, because as we think about the more platforms, the more channels we have to be in and driving that personalized experience, we have to be able to create content at scale that's affordable, right? And so that's going to become another big area, I think, of focus. But then also, how can we better leverage AI? We're working with some different technology partners today to just even evaluate our creative before it goes in flight, and making sure that we're adhering to specific channel best practices, which also allows us to better hold our agencies and content developers more accountable to meeting kind of minimum best practices on these platforms, but also allows us to start to build more specific learning or best practice criteria for all of our creative going forward to continue to improve that effectiveness piece. So we're definitely using AI and machine learning in a lot of different areas of our business. And I think the other area is really just around, how we better optimize our media investments across channels. Because to Rob's point, there is so many campaigns running in so many different channels across our business every single day, and your head count isn't necessarily increasing, right? So we have to drive more ways to be more efficient with our people resources. And how do you better use this technology in a way that can automate a lot of these decisions and the optimizations to get you to those better business outcomes?
Yeah. One more point on that one. The creative scoring is a very simple way to reduce the cost of your marketing from a force view perspective. It's too easy to fall in love with force view on YouTube for video, for instance. with a good creative scoring algorithm, you'll already know in advance that that video will be much more consumable to the viewer, and you will be able to abandon the force view 33% add-on. For YouTube, they don't do it because they want the extra revenue, in my opinion. They do it because you've got bad creative and you need to make it effective. So you've got to think about it through a different lens. A bit you don't look at your force view enough and then look at it as your creative problem. So not something to think about.
As far as big bets for 23, as well as what can you share without giving away too much, as far as kind of marketing leadership and execution, kind of big bets for 23 across Kellogg's?
Yeah, I think for my team, really, it's this big shift to an audience first strategy, and really doubling down on our first and third party data investments, getting to addressable audiences, and being able to really drive more audience segmentation so that we can get to better creative that we're developing that's talking to different groups within our kind of broad audience sets for each of our brands. And really just breaking down a lot of those barriers so that we can truly get to full funnel experiences that feel connected for our consumers and shoppers.
Awesome. I do have my first party data shirt on too, by the way.
Amazing.
It's not Pringles, but hey.
Jeff, on that one before, I'd like to bring two other points to bear on this one too. The first is narrative science is a huge unlock in the commercial domain. So I know that most of you in the room are marketers, but at some point you're going to have to try and get a message across the business around the intent of your campaigns. When you provide a report, a dashboard, it becomes wallpaper very quickly. Nobody's looking at it. They're not responding to it. They don't know how to act upon it. Whereas narrative science, which has been around for a decade, is coming back with great velocity. I think 2023 is going to be a big year for narrative science in the way that we are told what to do by the machine. It was that easy button. Remember, we all wanted the easy button? Yeah. So now it'll just tell you, there's 3 things you should do, Rob. And if you don't do number 1, don't do number 2. Until you've done number 1, and it's going to be very prescriptive about how you should act on the data, which I think is going to be a game changer, far more efficient, far more calculated. Yeah. The second one as well is that we're talking about privacy and the consumer rights and everything else, and one of the things we're trying to move forward towards is that recording of sentiment, and you could never do that really with scale because the technology was too expensive. Secondly, the privacy was a big issue. Well, now data mapping, so the binary map of a reaction on a face is becoming much more accessible. There's open source AI that can do that today. So now we are building that into our insight engine so that we can divorce the person from the reaction. So there's no connection. You're just a number, and we're just reading your reaction. So the puzzling, look, the nod of appreciation, or the scrutiny or the horror, it's all captured, without you having to know the person. So then you've got a massive amount of rich data to use. And it's taken a lot of the bias out of the equation. So the reactions you're reading are going to be much more honest, much more pure, and therefore should give you a far better insight that will have a high probability of success if you act on it in the right way.
And a lot faster, right?
Absolutely.
Near real time.
Real time, yeah.
So we have and with contextual too. So we have the patents on contextual.com. So our crawlers crawl on 1.9 trillion data calls a day in the U.S. and a lot of signals, right? Some of them you mentioned, and many others too. Contextual in nature is very hot right now topic, coupled with machine learning. I mean, really, you kind of spoke about the conclusions, but the users, the people, still have to apply that, which is really important. But closing thoughts or wisdom that you want to leave the audience with. Would love to just spend a few minutes on that, and then we'll open it up for questions if you guys want to start thinking of some questions.
Yeah, I think the biggest kind of thought or lesson that I've learned on this marketing transformation journey is to not try and boil the ocean. It's much easier to do a few things great than doing a lot of things not so great. And I think the other piece that I continue to kind of work with Rob on is like, how do we continue to prove value quickly? Because people, feel like man, we've heard this story before, we've tried this before, and it kind of, we move it a little bit, but we don't really move it enough to be meaningful, right? And so I think it's about, continuing to drive the constant learning agenda, but putting points on the board fast, and then really socializing those points quickly so that you can continue to turn more people into believers. And then as you start to get more believers, right, then you start to be able to embed more and more of this capability and the use cases back into the business. So that's my 2 cents.
What Nicole said.
Ditto. Do we have a few minutes for questions? Yeah. Cool. And again, we're gonna make sure today's great, right? I mean, that's ultimately the tagline at Kellogg's. But any questions though before we move on?
Is this on?
No.
Julie Saxon, Sierra Weather. I love what you were talking about with breaking down silos. But I'm curious from your experience, like for me as a consumer, I know you have different brand managers across Pringles, Cheez-Its, etc. Extra toasty Cheez-Its are my favorite. Cheddar Pringles are my favorite. How are you looking at me and my snacking needs across the journey of all the snacks I love?
Absolutely. So, we have a pretty significant first-party data set within our U.S. business, mostly formed out of our Kellogg Family Rewards program over the last, I'd say, 10 years or so, right? But ultimately, the way that we think about all of the data that we're collecting across consumers and shoppers is for our portfolio of brands. And then as we think about that data set, whatever the first-party data that you've provided to us on who you are, we're leveraging a lot of different data partners, whether that's with Epsilon, who's a great partner of ours, to enrich a lot of that data. And then we're working with other partners that help us to bring in a lot of that purchase-based behavioral data. So we're able to kind of get to a better 360 view of who you are. So even if I look at, this past year, we ran some really fantastic test and learns for data acquisition. And what we found was that, people that we had brought in over the years, maybe they came in on Frosted Flakes, right? And we knew that because maybe they uploaded a receipt for our loyalty program. But as we started to enrich that data, we found that all of those Frosted Flakes users, well, a big percentage of them are also buying 3, 4, maybe 5 other brands within our portfolio. So now that gives me a very different view of who this person is, and then how I can apply that data and create different segmentation to do, custom audiences or lookalike modeling within media. And all of those, right, are creating much better ROI improvements because we're able to find more people like you out there at scale. And so I think that it's we're trying to test a lot in that space with like enrichment and then different data partners that can give us additional signals. And then the tricky part then is like, how do you start to measure, right, like the lifetime value of that consumer over time? But we're getting closer to a lot of those different aspirations, but it's really important because we want to grow with our consumers. And, as we think about, one category or the other, or as your family is aging up, maybe you're moving from, one brand like Rice Krispies to now I'm buying Cheez-Its and Pringles
And wine.
And wine. But it allows us to give you better products and offerings that feel more personalized and tailored to you.
Awesome. One more question.
Hi, I'm Andrew Beckman with Location 3. I'm curious, do you guys have a local search or social strategy to driving consumers into the stores that you actually have your products in? And what does that look like? I know you're using data.
From a social perspective, or
Either
just
search, social, your products.
I can take that one. We don't today, but we're very much focused on delivering that online to offline experience. So O2O is an acronym that we should all be familiar with as well, because the combination of digital and physical, presence is the best 1-2 punch you could possibly have. So if you look at, the advertising on top of the Uber, for instance, is it driving past a convenience store? We may be running a national advert for Pringles. Why not make sure that anybody around that convenience store saw the dynamic advertisement saying, hey, the new Screaming Dill pickled Pringles is available in the store on your left. So we can get to that very quickly with computing power. It's just getting of the surfaces we need to broadcast against tied back to the on-shelf availability within the stores, which still leaves a gap. So as soon as we got that data, we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of use cases in this area for sure. We do partner with other shoppable media technology. MicMac is a big partner for us in the US, for example. But all that data, right, can be aggregated, collected, and then how we better serve kind of the next experience or the next engagement, leveraging location data, weather data, right? It's all opportunity to create more dynamic content and optimization and leveraging those signals to, better know where you are without being creepy, and all of those things.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing the stories and insights today. Hopefully everyone will go grab a can of Pringles at some point here at CES. So
Thank you,
Thanks, Jeff.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
You don't want it?